Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the statewide call. I'm Brett Garrett here in Santa Cruz. I'm a member of the steering committee of the California Alliance for Community Energy. The California Alliance for Community Energy envisions a community-based and democratized energy system which promotes affordable, resilient, local renewable energy resources, prioritizing low-income communities that have historically suffered inequitable access to essentials such as affordable energy and a healthy community. Thank you for joining us this month. Our topic today is the pathway to perdition, how the California ISO's pernicious proposal squanders California's customer assets, destroys the state's authority to control electricity costs, and ruins its ability to achieve clean energy goals, presented by CACE Steering Committee member Loretta Lynch. Loretta is the former president of the California Public Utilities Commission, who fought against gouging and manipulation by energy sellers throughout the California energy crisis in years 2000 to 2002, and she opposed PG&E's first bankruptcy bailout. She's a lawyer, writer, and progressive political activist, and she has a deep understanding of what's at stake in grid regionalization and specifically this Pathways Initiative. We are so lucky to have her on our team presenting to us today. Take it away, Loretta.
Thank you so much, Brett. And thanks for everybody for sharing your lunch hour with me and all of us, really. So we're just going to get into it. Just so you know, there is now a bill that has been introduced in the legislature just last week, SB 540, authored by Senator Becker and Senator Stern. So let's get into why do we need a change? And everybody knows California's utility rates for their private utilities have doubled over the last decade. This is the Public Advocates chart. We all know it because we feel it in our bills every day. And in the last 6 months, the governor and the legislature have really started to focus on affordability. So this bill, SB 540, maintains that one way to achieve rate reductions in our actual electricity bills is to implement SB 540. Let's talk about what that means and what the current state of the law is. So right now, we have a California independent system operator called the California ISO. And the California ISO runs both the electricity markets and our transmission grid. So it is a regional transmission operator that runs the electricity markets as well as a single state RTO. And California uniquely, the ISO must follow both California and federal law. And the key California law at issue today and in SB 540 is Public Utilities Code Section 345.5B, because California law mandates that the CAISO shall manage both the transmission grid and the energy markets to reduce overall economic cost to the state's consumers and minimize the administrative costs impact on ratepayers, to be consistent with applicable state law intended to protect the public's health and environment, and also to run the markets and the grid to maximize the availability of electricity necessary to meet California's consumer needs. So it's very California focused. It is a California state-created public benefits private nonprofit corporation, which then imposes specific duties to California because it's a California nonprofit public benefit corporation, and because it, as a California corporation, both the Attorney General and the legislature have oversight authority over this entity. That's the current state of the law. What does SB 540 do? SB 540's proponents claim that expanding California's energy market to a regional market provides up to $800 million in savings in the best case scenario, down to $112 million in savings in the most likely scenario, reduce gas generation, and moves California closer to its climate goals from the fact sheet, while retaining California's control over procurement, environmental reliability, and public policy. But we're going to unpack how and whether SB 540 delivers on those claims. Because SB 540 adds a new section to the Public Utilities Code, 345.6, which allows the CAISO board and only the board members, 5 board members appointed by Governor Newsom, after January of 2027 to implement tariff modifications, meaning file changes at the FERC, which the FERC has to accept to operate the energy markets where the rules are created and governed by an independent regional organization. Independent means independent from any California control. SB 540 explicitly subordinates our CAISO to a regional operator and to the Trump FERC. Because the CAISO, if it chooses to continue to run the electricity markets and not hand them over to the regional organization, can only operate those energy markets subject to the market rules that are determined by the regional organization. So either way, after January, the CAISO will either run the market or hand over a market to a regional organization as accepted by FERC. That's the big change in SB 540. And what does it do? SB 540 delays the new regional market to January 1st, 2027 or beyond, which means that the new governor who will take office by January 10th of 2027 will have their hands tied from the start, because the ISO board will have the sole authority to cede California's powers to this untested and unproven new corporation, which is going to require the Trump FERC to set entirely new rules, which are, one, going to prompt years of litigation to sort out, but two, give the Trump FERC unprecedented authority, new authority, over how California experiences electricity markets and electricity prices. Now, of course, SB 540's proponents have no analysis of how much that's going to cost us. Cost us to create a whole new corporation. No analysis of that cost has been conducted. Right now, the ISO costs California ratepayers over $200 million annually to operate. How much will California pay for a second corporate controller to sit on top of the ISO? But the most pernicious part of SB 540 is sotto voce. It's implied. It happens by operation of law, because when California cedes control over operating the electricity markets to a new regional organization, the likes of which haven't been seen yet, because it's only going to operate the markets and not the transmission grid, like the other RTOs nationwide, we will, by operation of law, transfer California's authority over our right to propose new rules or market corrections to FERC. That's called Section 205 filing authority. And the owner of the Section 205 filing authority is the market operator under operation of law. And so only the entity that controls Section 205 authority has the right to propose fixes in case this new market and this new regional operator doesn't work out for California. One of the reasons that the proponents claim we need this bill is because California needs access to more renewable power throughout the West. We're a net importer of power, and we need a bigger market to get more power. Well, that's just not factually true, because today California buys and sells electricity throughout the West through what's called the WEC, the Western Electric Coordinating Council. We've participated in the WEC for decades, and we trade power in the WEC and have power delivered through the WEC every day. In fact, California owns a significant amount of out-of-state electricity resources. Here in Arizona, California utilities own a part of the Palo Verde nuclear power plant. They also own some wind resources in New Mexico. We have long-term contracts, meaning the California utilities have long-term contracts with the hydro of the municipal utilities in Washington state. Long-term meaning 30 to 50-year contracts. So by legal contract and by actual ownership, as well as through trades, California obtains all the power, including all the renewable power it needs every hour of every day without ceding any control over our electricity markets to a new entity that will be controlled by FERC. But let's explore those benefits. So the SB 540 proponents cite to the Brattle Group's January 2025 study in their fact sheet right here. And they say in the fact sheet that the Brattle Group study shows, the Brattle Group did a study for the CEC for its IEPR or IPER process recently. And the Brattle Group study shows market benefits from maximum regionalization. All the states in the West joining, plus BC Hydro, joining this new regional organization. But the benefits the Brattle Group finds are only in 2032, 7 years from now. The Brattle Group study contains no evidence and no analysis of whether any economic benefits even exist during the next 6 years. And the Brattle Group posits several possibilities for ranges of benefits, depending on which other states join the regional organization. In the most likely or baseline scenario, the Brattle Group itself finds only $112 million in total benefits, which is equal to 0.2% of Californians' electricity bills. So in the most likely scenario, where only some states join the regional organization with California, there is a minuscule economic benefit in the 7th year, and a maximum of $790 million if all the 10 Western states plus BC Hydro. I can imagine how a Canadian company or Canadian utility wants to join the United States right now. If they all join this regional operator, Brattle calls that the maximum potential, but not likely. Even then, the savings 7 years out will amount to only 1.16% of Californians' electricity bills. So in the best case scenario, with everybody jumping into the pool, we'll get a 1% reduction. But in fact, that's not true, because the Brattle Group uses inaccurate modeling and assumptions of future ISO prices to find these minuscule market savings, because the Brattle Group fails to model the single price auction mechanism, which the ISO now uses and all electricity market operators use. The single price auction mechanism pays the highest price to all bidders who are taken, not the power production cost. Basically, how much did it cost the seller to produce the power? That's what the Brattle Group uses. Plus, they add in some assumed market savings into their model to get to these savings. So they use an estimate of what the prices in the ISO market will be, or in the new regional market will be in 7 years, that the actual markets do not use to set the prices at all. They do not model the single price auction mechanism, which is in fact used in every electricity market in the country. And even then, using the wrong assumptions and the wrong model, they can only find, if everybody jumps in the pool, which is not likely, 800 million or a little bit more than 1% of California's electric bills in 7 years. Okay, so not so many market benefits, right? But the claim is we're going to have some climate benefits. Well, let's look at that. This is a screenshot of the Brattle page 6, study page 6, where they discuss the climate benefits that accrue from the expanded EDAM, which is all 10 states plus BC Hydro coming in, and then the split market, which is a whole lot fewer states, but some states coming into this new regional entity. I'm looking at the right-hand side here because they claim this is the magic of percentages versus actual numbers. They claim, look, California's CO2 emissions are going to fall 11% when the WEC, we just saw that whole West-wide group, their emissions will only rise 1.3%. 11% is bigger than 1.3%. That's where they find the climate benefit. However, using percentages to claim a climate benefit is not the accurate way to look here. We need to look at the actual amount of GHG emissions that the Brattle Group itself models. And what they show themselves is that in the case where all 10 states come into the new regional organization, in the best case scenario, which of course is unlikely, California GHG emissions decrease is completely offset by the increase in the actual amount of the RO's west-wide emissions. So that is 2 million tons of CO2 decrease for California, but 2 million tons of CO2 increase in the West. So it is true, the conclusion that California, well, under their modeling assumptions, if everybody comes into this great new untested land, that California might experience some decrease in emissions, which will be completely offset in the Western United States. Talk about climate blinders here, guys. But if the alternate scenario of only some states coming into this market happen, the Brattle Group's own data shows that California will experience a 1 million ton decrease of CO2 emissions, which will be more than offset by the 3 million tons of additional CO2 emissions that will occur throughout the West, thereby causing more pollution and more carbon throughout the West if the most likely case, as modeled by the Brattle Group, occurs. Well, there goes our climate benefits, or California reaching more of its climate goals. And the Brattle Group's additional studies tout that we will that this new regional organization that will run our electricity markets will create a 10% reduction in solar and wind curtailments. Now, this is the all 10 states plus British BC Hydro come on in, but this is the most likely scenario, the split market. Just a couple of the states come in. And here you see versus today, actually a little bit more curtailment, if you can see on this graph, than what would happen today. But the other scenarios really don't give you much actual curtailment whatsoever. Maybe 10,000 megawatts of curtailment, maybe in the best case scenario where everybody joins the pool. Of course, there's no evidence that all the states want to join the pool or have even said they would join the pool. But when you look at this, really, we're not curtailing solar, we'll be mostly curtailing wind. So under the Brattle Group's own data, there is no climate benefit under the most likely scenario, split market here, and over here, the expanded market. And there is a climate detriment for CO2 emissions if the most likely scenario happens. So that's strike two. Really minuscule and illusory cost savings and actual increases in CO2 emissions if this happens. But they say, hey, we are going to have access to more power, which will make us more reliable. And that's just a better thing. A bigger market's a better market is the assumption. Not so fast. Let's take a look at the other states that will be joining a market in. And those other states do not share California's climate goals. Oh, no. In fact, most of the other states don't even have climate goals. And some of the other states don't even recognize climate change. So these are the states in that expanded maximum market model. All of these states have to join in to get any of the benefits. But of course, if all, or to just have a climate neutral in terms of GHG emissions. But if all of these states join in, these are the states that we will be basically yoking ourselves to without any ability to shape or control the rules that come out of the regional market operator. But we know who will have the ability to shape and control the rules of the regional market operator, and that's the Trump administration. This slide shows that last time, in the first Trump administration, plans leaked where the Trump administration was going to order grid operators, those are those regional market operators, to buy electricity from struggling coal plants for 2 years using emergency authority that normally presidents use just for natural disasters. But we now know that the second Trump administration isn't even going to have that fig leaf because they've already issued an executive order increasing the supervision of independent agencies like FERC. And that means that the FERC will have to submit all their rules, all their plans to OMB and the Energy Czar, Doug Burgum, who's also the Interior Secretary, for review and approval. And the new Trump FERC chair, Mark Christie, has already said publicly that he will be happy to comply with this new executive order. So, not surprisingly, some of those states that we're going to get yoked to are already extending the life of their coal-fired plants in anticipation of these Trump coal subsidies. Pacificor announced the day after the inauguration that they were not going to retire their Utah-based coal-fired plants. Instead, they're running them indefinitely. And why is that? Because under a Trump rule that would require the market operator to subsidize or use or require coal resources in its geographical footprint, if we go to that 10 states, or even if we go to 4 or 5 states, you can see that the geographical footprint will include coal-fired electricity generation. Now, right now, California does have one experimental 62 megawatt coal plant that serves one industrial customer and does not trade on the market. So right now, California's single state electricity market operator is one of the cleanest climate-wise of all the electricity market operators in the country. But when we expand the geographical footprint, we take on all these coal plants and we make Californians vulnerable to being required by the Trump administration to subsidize and buy this coal right here. So not only does the Brattle Group study show that GHG emissions will in fact increase if it's a smaller footprint here, you can see why now, right? If we expand just to the smaller footprint of right here, but indeed, GHG emissions may increase well beyond what the Brattle Group anticipates if the Trump administration follows through with what it tried to do the first time and what it's already doing the second time in order to prop up coal. So you think that this is going to help reduce coal and shut those coal plants in the West if California brings our climate policies to the West? Oh no. California is going to be making its own laws vulnerable. And this is how our renewable portfolio standard stands as one of the beacons in the nation of incenting renewable energy projects in California and in the area around California. That renewable portfolio standard was created in 2001 with our single state market in mind, because our market began in 1998. If we expand our geographical footprint, as I just showed you, to these states that have additional coal resources, we will put the RPS at risk. Why? Because even if the regional operators' corporate documents respect California law, and we'll get into the supposed protections in SB 540 in just a minute, any player in this market, any trader, any seller, any buyer can sue in court to invalidate California's RPS law as violating the Interstate Commerce Clause. Because now electricity will be deemed to be delivered into this market, not into this market, as the RPS anticipates. And that means if you're a renewable energy developer and you have the opportunity to sell your renewable power into California under the same terms as you have now, right, in the single state market, but you can locate that renewable power plant anywhere in the West, you are going to go for the state that is cheaper because it has cheaper land, cheaper labor, because so many of these states are anti-union, and also fewer, and that means cheaper environmental standards, which will, by the way, drain good green jobs out of California, which the proponents aren't even challenging. Of course, that's going to happen because this is what the market will look like under SB 540. Well, you say, hey, California, SB 540 has some protections, and so we can all agree that California law will be respected. In fact, that is one of the main guardrails in the talking points, is that This will be done in a manner, let me just quote that again, so that California can retain control over procurement, environmental reliability, and other public policies. Yeah, we'll tell that to Maryland. That's what Maryland thought when Maryland joined PJM, their regional market, back in several decades ago. They had an explicit deal with all the other states and with PJM, their regional operator, to a legal agreement, a contract to respect Maryland's laws and respect Maryland's requirement for its in-state utilities to contract and use Maryland's own in-state power, right? Everybody agreed to it. Maryland joined PJM until PJM, which is the regional operator in this scenario, changed its mind years later and decided they weren't going to respect Maryland's law anymore. Maryland went to the FERC and said, hey, we all agreed. And so those were the conditions under which we joined this regional operator. And FERC said, yeah, the regional operator can change the rules. Maryland took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court backed FERC because Maryland gave up its authority when it joined that regional operator. And therefore, Maryland state laws were successfully challenged. That can happen here. So what will this, hit too many buttons there. So really what is happening in SB 540? SB 540 means that California's ISO will answer to the RO, the regional organization or the regional operator, which will be, we know from the documents, a Delaware corporation. That's not in the law in SB 540. It doesn't say it has to be a Delaware corporation. We just know that the Pathways Group intends for it to be a Delaware corporation. And that's important because that will sidestep California's mandates under Section 345.5B to reduce costs and to maximize electricity to California. How? Because SB 540 says that, excuse me, I don't mean to laugh, that the CAISO board can choose to use energy markets governed by an independent regional organization in lieu of managing markets as provided in subdivision B of 345.5. So they will tell you they're not repealing 345.5B. They just are allowing the CAISO to not follow it. In lieu of means that the CAISO can choose to not follow California state law. In lieu of means the CAISO can choose to use energy markets, which have no legal meaning, the words use energy markets, and that'll create years of litigation about what that means. Use energy markets governed by a regional organization that does not have to follow California law, which means 540 effectively repeals the protections that California added after the energy crisis to reduce cost to our consumers and to maximize resources to our consumers. It's a very artful, duplicitous, pernicious wording. In lieu of means ignore the law if you choose. And that is what SB 540 actually says and does. But there's more. SB 540 has protections. And they say the CAISO cannot cede its authority until the CAISO can determine that this new regional organization does a couple things. Well, let's look at what the new regional organization actually has to do. So SB 540 allows the board to cede the running of electricity markets to this new RO if the RO's governance documents include a corporate obligation to respect the authority of each state. That's an A1. Well, a corporate obligation and respect have actually no legal meaning. It also does not require, there's no FERC obligation to agree. So these corporate documents could be just like Google's corporate mission statement, which is to do no harm. How's that worked out for all of us with Google's motto? So it could be a motto or a mission statement that they include in this corporate obligation to respect, because those words are vague and meaningless. Of course, there's also no enforceability if those governance documents, corporate obligation, not legal obligation. Note that it doesn't say legal obligation. It says a corporate obligation. don't meet what we would think of as a protection. But moreover, California will have no say in this regional organization. Instead of the governor appointing and the state Senate confirming the 5 board members, all the RO board has to do is maintain a public policy committee that will engage with states about potential impacts to states, which basically means California will be reduced to having begging rights to the RO. Please, sir, please don't create markets that raise our rates and require us to buy coal. Please, sir. But there's no obligation to actually listen to the states or even to consult with the states. They're just going to engage with the state. And then they're going to maintain a relationship with and seek input from a body of state regulators to receive the views of state regulators, much like the King of England would receive the views of a diplomat or any other supplicant before it. We can receive the views. We don't have to act on the views or respect the views or do anything else with the views of the body of state regulators. But remember, that body of state regulators is composed with a bunch of regulators from a bunch of states that don't even believe climate change is real. And then, of course, the most also, instead of actually having a state law that requires the market to be run to minimize costs, instead, the RO will only have to, this is the only cost provision in the bill, maintain access to independent market analysis on the impacts of these dynamics and rule changes to minimize overall costs. You just have to maintain some access. Basically, read a report, have a library of independent market analyses that are telling you this ain't working for consumers, but you don't have to do anything about it, because the RO will not be subject to 345.5B, because 345.5B will be sidestepped or annulled effectively, because it will be, the RO's rules will be in lieu of, this rule of maintaining access to analysis will be in lieu of mandates to minimize cost. But the most important piece here has been the promise of proponents to permit, to give an exit ramp. If this doesn't work out as estimated, promised, and idealized, hypothesized, well, California will be able to get out of it. And indeed, the RO has to permit and provide a procedure for withdrawal by any participant with reasonable prior notice. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that the RO, it leaves all withdrawal conditions entirely to the RO's discretion. So the RO could decide that reasonable prior notice is 10 years or 20. And while we wait in a market that is broken for that time period to occur, we will have already agreed, without knowing what the RO is going to decide, to these kinds, the withdrawal conditions. Moreover, other entities, other specific individual utilities that have asked to leave their RTOs have been told, maybe if you pay tens of millions of dollars, because you have to compensate us for all sorts of things that are within our sole discretion to require you to do. So the fact that all withdrawal conditions are entirely the purview of this new regional organization that does not even have to consider the interests of Californians is the only exit ramp in the bill. So let's go back to this ISO and see what SB 540 really means. RO independence means no accountability to California. California's current law that requires the ISO to run the markets to protect consumers, environment, and health, minimize costs, and maximize resources will be sidestepped. And this Delaware corporation will have no legal or enforceable duty to provide for California customers. California will have no say in the running of the board because they only have to maintain a relationship or seek input from our state regulators. And of course, no defined exit ramp. They can impose punishing and unworkable payments, unworkable requirements, lots of, trying to get through the eye of the needle, and extraordinary delays if California actually tries to withdraw. So California needs to look at the language, look at the Brattle Group's numbers, and not these distracting and, I would argue, illusory percentages, and know our legal risks before we irrevocably leap into the Trump FERC's grasp. Because changing our statutory control over the ISO's market and grid operations and changing from a California corporation to a non-California corporation eliminates the legal protections that California won in ISO v FERC in 2004. The DC Circuit in 2004 specifically allowed California not to follow all the Bush FERC's rules and to allow California to follow its own state laws because the ISO is a California state chartered corporation. And changing the market operator from a California corporation to a Delaware or any other state's corporation eliminates all the protections we won in the DC Circuit by eliminating the res judicata effect of this court case. So once California gives away its control over our electricity market and gives away our Section 205 authority, could you please mute? Lane, could you mute? Thanks. California will throw away our control over our electricity market for good. And I would argue now is not the time for California to surrender our authority and our independence to the Trump FERC. And now is never the time to tie the hands of the next California governor and make that governor Gray Davis. Pete Wilson signed the deregulation law on his watch, but it didn't take effect until the next governor showed up. And I can tell you, as an appointee of Gray Davis to the PUC, just how hard it was to protect California after the prior governor had thrown away control. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this presentation from the California Alliance for Community Energy. This concludes the published portion of our monthly call. If you would like to participate in our monthly calls, including Q&A, please consider joining the California Alliance for Community Energy. For more information, you can see our website at cacommunityenergy.org/apply.